All right, let's get started here. We're going to start off the way we started last week, which is our principles and our beatitudes. So, if you remember how we do this, up there will be I'll say the principle, and you all will respond with the corresponding beatitude. All right? Sound good? Let's jump in here. Here we go. Realize I'm not God. I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. Earnestly believe that God exists, that I matter to Him, and that He has the power to help me recover. Consciously choose to commit all my life and will to Christ's care and control. Openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. Whoops, sorry. My apologies. There we go. Try that again. There we go. Happy fingers here. That's what it is. Voluntarily submit to every change God wants to make in my life and humbly ask Him to remove my character defects. Evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, and make amends for harm I've done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. Reserve a daily time with God for self-examination, Bible reading, and prayer in order to know God and His will for my life and to gain the power to follow His will. Oh, sorry, this is me too. Yield myself to God to be used to bring this good news to others, both by my example and by my words. All right, excellent. Well, welcome back. Glad that you guys are back for another round. Is everybody doing well tonight? Good. All right. Everybody enjoying spring break? Like Logan asked me, I think it was yesterday morning. I was heading out to go to staff meeting, and Logan said, "Daddy, when's your spring break?" Well, that's not how that works, man. That's not. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so, anyway, here we go. We're gonna jump right in here. We're gonna try to make the most of our time here and make sure I've created timers on my watch here so I can keep myself in line here with our schedule. The first thing I want to throw out here is we've mentioned it before, and I know that some of you have taken a site visit to Marion Naz for their Celebrate Recovery. And kind of now that we have our, I don't know what the correct terminology is, but I'm calling you guys our launch team, our launch team, okay? So now that we have kind of our launch team, I would love to take everyone back again, just to see that. If you've been there, you get to see it again. If you've not, you get to see it for the first time. And so that's one of those opportunities where like all of the stuff that we're talking about, did it work? Did you fix it? And it worked? Dave, you're the best. All of the logistical things that we're talking about here, they kind of start to make sense when you see it in person. And so what I'm looking at, and we'll work out details and things like this, but if you want to go ahead and throw this on your calendar, I'm looking at a May 2nd visit to Marion Naz. Now, they have theirs on Thursday, so it would be a Thursday, obviously, because that's when they have it. So Thursday, May 2nd, we'll look at doing that. We'll work out details in terms of what time we'll be leaving here. We'll carpool up there in the van, and if we need two vehicles, then we'll grab a different one. But we'll do that. So plan for May 2nd. Go ahead and throw that on your calendars. And like I said, more information will come as we create those plans. Okay, so our first part are now we're kind of training. We're looking at logistical things like this is rubber meeting the road. This is what things are going to look like. Last week we talked about the 7 keys or the 7 pillars of Celebrate Recovery. And now as we start to move forward in these trainings, they're going to get very practical and logistical. Like, what is this actually going to look like? And the truth is we're not really going to spend that much time on them. They're going to be kind of quick, brief things to get us started, things that are important to work through, but I truly want the meat of this time together to be kind of the new lessons, but even more significant than that is our time in our small group discussions, because I think that's where the good stuff is going to happen, okay? And so these are going to be very, like I said, very practical, very logistical. Tonight we're going to talk through the large group format of Celebrate Recovery. So what does a Celebrate Recovery night look like? Over the next few weeks, we'll be talking about kind of the logistics of a whole Celebrate Recovery night, what that whole night looks like, and we'll do it section by section. Tonight, we'll be looking specifically at the kind of the large group session. What does that look like? And so as we are looking through these next few weeks, as we're talking through what a Celebrate Recovery night looks like, I want you to be thinking, obviously, what does this look like? But beyond that, this is an opportunity for you to start thinking, is there something that I'm hearing about that I would like to be involved in? As we kind of explain what this looks like, that's kind of where do I fit in this? What roles can I play, or where can I step in and use my skills and my passions when we're talking about those things? Okay, so that's what I want you to think about, more than just hearing what this looks like. Try to hear, like, what is it that maybe God has for me to do here. So let's talk large group format. There is. You do have the full page handout. That's kind of just an example of a night schedule. It was just one that was a generic one that was provided, so I printed off so you can see. But we'll just talk through kind of real quick what this looks like. The first thing is this: the possibility and the hope for food to start with. When we go to Mary and Naz, we'll as long as it's okay with them, again, we will plan to go there before their Celebrate Recovery service so that we can partake in the meal as well. One, because it's good, and any meal that I don't have to cook is double good. But just to see what it's like, just kind of the fellowship that takes place before, and also because we hope to kind of model that as well, have those meals ahead of time. I did talk with Kim, who is the coordinator of the Hope Center meals today, to kind of plant the seed of what would it look like for us to kind of partner with the Hope Center. They're already providing meals here at a very convenient time when it comes to Celebrate Recovery. They serve from 4:30 to 6, and so Celebrate Recovery would likely start at 6:30 as we're doing this. So I kind of planted that seed. What would it look like for us to partner with the Hope Center to kind of provide resources, financial resources, but also volunteer resources to kind of so that we can invite our Celebrate Recovery people to participate in food there. And then the bones are already there, right? The blueprint's already there. And so I talked to her about that, kind of planted that seed. And so I'm hopeful about that. I think that's going to be a good thing. Again, just an opportunity for people to kind of interact with each other, fellowship before we jump into Celebrate Recovery. So food, and then coming into a large group gathering, that's going to kind of look like is kind of a lot like a regular church service. We're going to have kind of hospitality folks, greeters at the entrances. In my experiences in going to different CRs, hospitality is so important with Celebrate Recovery. Just someone there who's genuinely excited for every single person who walks through the door. Like, I can't tell you the amount of hugs that I received going into a brand new Celebrate Recovery. And I know not everybody's huggers, and that's fine. But just that genuine, like, man, I am so excited that you're here tonight. Like, that's what we want. So we'll have greeters kind of stationed at entrances. The other thing that will be kind of as people are walking in, we're going to have a Celebrate Recovery kind of resource table or resource hub. There's going to be lots of different things on that. I got a few things up here just to kind of show. You've heard me talk about like the different issues, like Saddleback has their 25 different issues that they kind of go. They also, with that, they have issue handouts, like issue specific handouts. And so kind of a resource hub will be equipped with all of these different issue handouts that people can take. People can see those. Celebrate Recovery, I mentioned last week, I actually had the translation. They do now have the Celebrate Recovery Study Bible in the NIV. And so we got a copy of that kind of, they'll have some of those out there. They have, Celebrate Recovery puts out a 28-day devotional, a little devotional booklet, a little kind of getting you started, your first step to Celebrate Recovery, just a little book, just lots of little resources like that, that we will equip. We want to equip people. We want to just have something for people to just take, like, hey, I'm interested in this. And so that will kind of be the resource hub. I'm going to pass this is I just printed off 2 issue pamphlets, chemical dependency and then codependency. I'm going to pass those around. You can just kind of take a peek and see what those look like. So that's the resource table will be equipped with that, but that'll also be staffed. So like we want a couple, 1 or 2 people at the resource table. Again, just connections. Like, hey, so glad you're here. Is there anything I can help you find on this table? Again, that hospitality is significant. Mm-hmm. They are. That's a great question that I have in my notes here. Thank you. That resource table is going to be a CR resource only. Now, we know, I already have like resources in my mind that I'm like, this is super helpful in this and that kind of thing. But we want that area to be kind of, this is a Celebrate Recovery resource table, to kind of prevent the confusion of like what am I getting? What's there? Like what's not there? And so I think there will be opportunities in other kind of scenarios for other resources, but on this specific resource hub, it'll be a Celebrate Recovery kind of specific issued resources, right? And so, yeah, that's good. Thank you for asking that because I would have overlooked that on my notes here. So resource table. We'll come in, we'll gather together, we'll kind of welcome, opening prayer, things like that, just introduction. There will be worship, times of worship through music. And so as we talked about last week, this is kind of one of the significant distinctions between a Christ-centered recovery program and other recovery programs. Stinking, I set my own timer and now I can't stick to it. Worship, we'll have a time of worship. Just a few things I want to point out. We talked a little bit about why we worship, why that's a part of it last week. Just a couple other things that I think are important. Just a few reasons that we sing at Celebrate Recovery. Horizontal impact. So horizontal impact, kind of this idea that singing corporately encourages others so that others can be filled. I don't know about you, but I've had experiences where I've come into a Sunday morning service and I'm not feeling it. You know what I mean? Like it's not it, but I can in the midst of other people worshiping, something happens within me, right? And so we sing for the horizontal impact, but also for the vertical impact. We believe that there is a connection that is made when we worship God, right? The Holy Spirit is present in that. And then also we worship out of a posture of gratitude, right? It's a reminder of who God is for us, what God has done for us. And so taking that opportunity to worship together is simply singing from a place of thankfulness. All right, so there will be, like I said, there will be worship. Then they'll move into the time where we've started, where there's the reading of the 8 principles. And so, again, where I'm talking about places where people can be plugged in, I'm not reading the principles all the time, right? Other people will have an opportunity to read through the principles and lead the whole group in that kind of responsive reading of the 8 principles. That'll go into a time of probably announcements. And one of the things when it comes to announcements, what we want that to be is an opportunity to make it clear for a newcomer what to accept. I can't talk. What to expect and where to go. Right? So an announcement time of this is what the rest of this night is going to look like. After we're finished here, we're going to have open share groups. If this is your first time here, hey, we're having a newcomer 101 group that meets in classroom, whatever it is. I don't know. This is where we want you to go. The announcement time is just making sure that anybody who's there for the first time feels like they belong and knows where to go, knows what their next step is, knows what to do, knows where to go. All of that kind of speaks to really the whole culture of Celebrate Recovery. The whole culture of Celebrate Recovery is such that someone who is there for the first time feels like they're the most important person in the world. Like they belong, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure you know what you're doing, where you're going, that you feel like you're a part of this and you're not confused or you're not lost, right? We want to make it as easy as possible for a newcomer to make the next step, right? Newsflash for you, like that's not just a CR culture thing, right? This is just that should be our goal anytime, right? Is we want every person to be able to make it as easy as possible for every person to be able to make the next step on their journey with Jesus, right? And so announcements are just one of those ways we can do that. From announcement time, we'll go into the teaching or testimony. I know I've said this before. We talked about the curriculum, the 25 lessons. We will alternate lesson one week and testimony the next week. And so those are like a 20-minute thing. It's not significant. It's not super long. Something to think about as we're talking about this. Some of you will be some of our first testimonies for the Celebrate Recovery program, all right? So I know that might be overwhelming a little bit, but we'll get there. That's part of this process that we're working through. Part of our step study, part of the books that we're going through are going to work towards us creating our CR testimonies, right? And so those testimonies, some of you will be those first ones that get to share your testimony as we launch Celebrate Recovery. So don't let that overwhelm you too much now. We'll get there. We'll work through that as we go. After that teaching or testimony time, we will then close with the Serenity Prayer, which is how we close each time. And then from there, we'll dismiss. We'll break off into our open share groups. And then after, we'll talk about open share groups a little bit more specifically next week. Break off into open share groups. After that, we'll probably have, I'm not sure exactly what this looks like, but we don't want it to be like at the end of open share group, it's like, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, right? We want to kind of create a kind of a culture of allowing some lingering, because it's in that lingering and those fellowship times where I think I talked about last week, where those other connections can be made. Folks can look for someone to kind of sponsor them, to be maybe their mentor or accountability kind of thing. We want to provide opportunities for that. So whether that looks like, some coffee or some dessert, I don't know what that looks like, but something where it's not like open share's done, you got to go home, right? We want to foster some fellowship. So and then that's the end of the night. And so as I said before, every aspect of a Celebrate Recovery night requires volunteers. Logan's back there. Every aspect of a Celebrate Recovery night requires volunteers. So as you're hearing those things and you're listening, like, where do I fit in? Those are some of the significant areas where we need people. All right? I told you that those are going to be quick trainings, but that's what a Celebrate Recovery night looks like, large group format. Does anybody have any questions about that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how long do those last?
Yeah. So open share groups, typically a lot for 30 to 45 minutes. I don't know what it says on there.
It only gives us 5 minutes to the 8
It doesn't.
o'clock table. Turn it right side so you can see it.
Okay, I see. Okay, so they're talking 7 to 8.
I think they did an hour in there.
Did they do an hour? Yeah. So there's a little bit like a more open-ended there, but not too open. I think an hour is kind of the maximum. A lot of it depends on how large an open chair group is. If you have 6 people and every person is allotted their 5 minutes, their 3 to 5 minutes, then you're at, is that 30 minutes? It's good math right there, 30 minutes. But if you have 12, then you're talking, if everybody takes their 5 minutes, then you're talking an hour. So I think I remember that it's allotted for an hour, but the reality is most of them wrap up closer to the 45-minute mark. So that's a good question. Thank you. Any other questions on, large group, CR night in general? I think Marion does, but not all. That's the only one that I've been to that does. Well, honestly, we haven't had that conversation here about what that looks like. My plan at what we've talked about now is to budget as if we don't need to take an offering there, and then if we decide to, then we may. Yeah, but yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So, thank you. I don't know how I didn't put that in there. We're going to talk about. That's going to be a whole separate. We're going to talk about the chip ceremony at some point, but it should have still been on there. The ending is the chip dialogue. There's chips for recovery. There's your first time at CR, you get a blue chip. I can't remember all the colors, but then your second week, and then like a month, 6 month, year, this kind of thing. You get these chips, and then there's we'll talk about what this looks like. But there's this whole thing. That's why we keep coming back, right? Like every time after every one, that's why we keep coming back. When we go to Marion, you'll be blown away by the way they do it, because it's just like this big party, and it's the celebration of even if you relapsed and today's your first day sober, it's like the craziest party in the world, which is so stinking beautiful. You'll be blown away by it. I know that there are other people who are like, I don't really love the way Marion does that. Whatever, it's a party. I like it. So, yes, so there will be at the end, there will be that chip presentation. Thank you. And then we will talk more what that looks like in a few weeks here. That'll be one of our topics that we touch on. Thank you. Any other things here? Good? All right, let's spend 2 minutes. Whoops, that's the wrong timer. I am timing here. 2 minutes recapping from last week. Hopefully you did your homework in your book here, and you got your book with us. Let's just recap, and then we're going to break off into our groups. Last week we started the first one in Principle 1, looking at denial. So the idea is before we can take the first step of our recovery, we must first face and admit our denial. You can't heal a wound by saying it's not there, from Jeremiah 6. And so, of course, we had the acrostic for denial. What happens if if we're not willing to face our denial? The D is it disables our feelings. By repressing our feelings, we freeze our emotions. Understanding and feeling our feelings is freedom. The next thing that happens is energy lost. As you're probably well aware, a side effect of denial is anxiety. Anxiety causes us to waste precious energy running from the past and worrying about and dreading the future. It's only in the present, today, where positive change can occur. Also, denial negates growth. We're as sick as our secrets. We cannot grow in recovery until we are ready to step out of our denial and into the truth. And then denial also isolates us from God. God's light shines our truth. God's light shines on the truth. Our denial keeps us in the dark. It also alienates us from our relationships. Denial tells us we are getting away with it. We think no one knows, but they do. And so the answer there is Ephesians 4, stop lying to each other, tell the truth, for we are parts of each other, and when we lie to each other, we are just hurting ourselves. And then also, denial lengthens the pain. We have the false belief that denial protects us from our pain. In reality, though, denial allows our pain to fester and grow and turn into shame and guilt. So, There we go. I finished that right as my timer was going off. How about that? That's denial. We're going to break off into our small groups, and we're going to spend let's shoot for maybe 50 minutes. So if we can be back in here 7:45, 7:50, we'll do that real quick. I just want to mention this. We forgot to do this last week. I forgot to mention it, but at the beginning of each small group, we will read the small group guidelines just as a way to remind ourselves of those things. And then I just want to kind of maybe throw out a point of clarification on this, and I've had to get some clarification here as we've been working through this. The first couple of groups that we've done in the share time, we've structured them more like what an open share group would look like, where it's kind of going around the room. Everybody has your 3 to 5 minutes, and then you kind of move on to the next one, and that's it, right? Because we're not looking to offer advice or fix people or things like that. When it comes to these step studies, these become more of the more kind of intimate and more focused groups where we're building relationships and trust. And so this is going to lend itself more to kind of conversational feel. And so it doesn't have to look like just going around the room, I say my 3 to 5 minutes and then we move on. It lends itself more to conversation and things like that. But with that in mind, we're still keeping the small group principles and guidelines in mind. Okay, we're still not dominating the conversation, right? We're still looking at that like 3 to 5 minutes, and I've said my piece, I need to let somebody else talk, right? So we need to make sure we're not dominating the conversation. And also, we're still not, even in the dialogue, we're still not looking to fix one another, right? Even in the dialogue, our dialogue is focused on what is God showing and teaching me? What's God doing inside of me? And reflections on that. Does that make sense? So it is more dialogue, but we're still doing that within the small group guidelines, if that makes sense. Okay. So we will, and Chelsea will, ladies, Chelsea will lead you kind of through those questions. Guys, we'll do the same. There's questions, and kind of how that looks just kind of depends on the group and what that looks like. If everybody's going through every answer, that may not be the case. It may be more of like from all these questions, this is kind of my takeaway from this. So it's really just kind of up to the group and how that takes shape. But it should be focused on kind of the scope of those questions and kind of what God revealed to you in the midst of those questions. Okay? Yeah. They should be, so, they should be in there somewhere. 15? There we go. Yep, 15 in there. 15 is in there. I will on the YouTube channel week 1. I go pretty in depth on those and just kind of explaining those. But the list of them is right there in 15. On 15. Okay, all good. Okay, sweet. Let's go ahead and break off into small groups. And like I said, we can be back here 7:45, 7:50, something like that. That'll be good. Okay. We're going to jump back in here. Ladies, I hope you all had as good a conversation as we had. That's good stuff. So I'm excited for where this is taking us. With that, we've got a few more minutes to kind of introduce the next lesson. And so this will lead into your homework for tonight. And I'm going to get through this quickly. I'll kind of do some abbreviated. Here's the beauty of this in our group. Like I said, the meat and the power is when we're in our small groups just talking about this. And so what I'm teaching here, it's good introduction, but you'll have kind of the Cliff Notes version in your book as you're working through that. And so it doesn't need to be anything crazy. So these first 2 lessons, denial and then tonight, are the 2 lessons that have to do with principle 1, the 8 principles that we've listed, where we realize that we're not God and we admit that we're powerless to control our tendency to do the wrong thing, and their lives have become unmanageable. And so tonight we're talking about powerlessness. Powerlessness, all right? And so last week, denial, and now we're looking at powerless. So just the recognition that we are powerless to fix this on our own, right? And so here's what we're going to do. There are four actions that we're going to focus on. By focus on, I mean just kind of flying right through here. These are actually, I believe, on your half sheet handout. They're on the back. Maybe that's the front. Whatever. I don't know. where there's more blanks here. Four actions. The first one we talked about, this was last week's lesson. So stop denying the pain, right? Four actions. Stop denying the pain. We talked about those negative effects that we kind of went over last week with the acrostic. We've established that you're ready to accept the principle one when your pain is greater than your fear. David in Psalm 6:2-3 says, "Pity me, O Lord, for I am weak. Heal me, for my body is sick, and I am upset and disturbed. My mind is filled with apprehension and gloom." David's pain kind of reaches this point where it finally surpasses his fear. He was able to face his denial and feel the reality of his pain, and it's in that point that we can move forward, right? So the overcoming the denial part has to be step one. We can't move forward if we're constantly just in denial, right? So stop denying the pain. The second action that we need to do is stop playing God. Again, where we realize that we're powerless to fix all of this on our own. And so when we do that, it's kind of us trying to play God, right? So stop denying the pain, stop playing God. Okay, now, so we stopped two things. Now we're going to start two things. Start admitting our powerlessness. The lust of power is not rooted in our strengths, but our weaknesses. We need to realize our human weaknesses and quit trying to do it by ourselves. So, start admitting our powerlessness. And then the last action is start admitting that our lives have become unmanageable. One of the, that was start admitting that our lives have become unmanageable, if you're trying to jot that down. One of the things, those first two questions of the denial, kind of the workbook there of what do you control in your life and what do you have no control over? I don't know, for me that was kind of oh man, the actual things that I can control are pretty few and far between, right? On my own, I don't have control over this. So start admitting that our lives are unmanageable. That's the first part. We've got to get there before we can move on. So tonight, on the other side of your paper, our acrostic tonight is going to be powerless, okay? So our acrostic tonight demonstrates what happens when we admit that we are powerless. And so what happens when we admit we're powerless, our lives are unmanageable without the help of a higher power of Jesus? What happens when we're actually able to admit that we are powerless? And so what we're going to say here is when we begin to admit that we're powerless, we also begin to give up on the following serenity robbers. Okay, so the serenity prayer that we'll say here in just a minute, those things in our lives that CR calls serenity robbers, things that kind of negate what we talk about, what we pray about when we pray the serenity prayer. When we admit our powerlessness, we begin to give up these serenity robbers. Okay, so here we go. Your acrostic. If you miss some of these, they're in your little book here. You can catch that. Okay. The first letter is P. Obviously, we start to see that we are no longer trapped by our pride. When we admit our powerlessness, we see that we are no longer trapped by our pride. When God's presence is welcome in our lives, there is no room for pride because He makes us aware of our true self. Recognizing our powerlessness helps us to kind of get rid of our pride. Next, we begin to lose the only ifs. That's the O, the only ifs. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. You've had the case of the only ifs, right? Only if this person hadn't done this to me. Or only if if I would have stopped drinking sooner, or only if this, only if that. These ideas of if this would have happened, if that would have happened, it's really like it's about regret or focusing on the past, right? And so when we admit that we're powerless, we can begin to give up those. We can begin to lose the only ifs. The next letter is W, which stands for worrying me. Worrying me? No, worrying. W is worrying. A lot of worrying, if we're honest, is a form of not trusting God with whatever it is that we're worrying about. Instead of worrying about things we cannot possibly do, we have to instead focus on what God can do. And so this is the idea of the serenity prayer, right? Helping us to realize what we can change and what we cannot change and how to kind of live within that. And so kind of referring to that serenity prayer helps us to kind of focus on the things that we do have control over. And so, the hope with Celebrate Recovery as we work through this program is that we can find that trust and that relationship in the higher power of Jesus, right? And so in that trust and building that trust and that relationship, we can then start to focus on the things that we can control right here, the present, right? And not worrying about the things that are coming that we don't really have control over. Okay, so helps us get rid of worry. Next thing that happens when we admit we're powerless is that we quit trying to escape. Quit trying to escape. Those are kind of the things we talked about in I think it was number 4 in our previous questions of coping skills, of coping mechanisms where we kind of remove ourselves from a situation. When we admit we're powerless, we can quit trying to escape. Because we admitted we were powerless, we tried to escape and hide from our hurts, habits, and hang-ups by getting involved in unhealthy relationships, abusing substances, eating, not eating, so on and so forth. And when we try to always escape the pain, it drains us of our energy. And so when we take this first step, God opens true escape routes to show His power and grace. So we admit we're powerless. That helps us to stop trying to escape. The R in powerless stands for resentments. Resentments. And so as you know, as I know, as we all probably know, if resentments are suppressed and allowed to just fester, resentments can act like emotional cancer, where they just take over our lives and they just take over. Paul tells us in Ephesians 4:26 and 27, in your anger do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. As we continue to work through these principles, we're going to come to understand that in letting go of our resentments, offering forgiveness to those who have hurt you, we're not just freeing the person who has harmed us, but we're also freeing ourselves, right? And so then we move on to the L. The L. If we admit to our powerlessness, we also give up loneliness. We give up loneliness, right? Can I just tell you, like, just from like in the guys group, and I hope you guys experience it here, like you girls experience it as well. Like, there's just power to being together in a group like this and just sharing those things, right? That's a fighting against loneliness, right? Because a lot of times we can feel alone in our struggles, in our battles, and when we can be here and we can share honestly, we can realize that, hey, you know what? We're not so lonely after all. So, loneliness. E. When you admit you're powerless, you also give up emptiness. When you finally admit that you're truly powerless by yourself, that empty feeling deep inside will go away. Jesus said, my purpose is to give life in all its fullness. So we want to let Him fill the emptiness inside of us. We want to be able to tell Him how we feel, right? He cares about our feelings, what's going on inside of us. And so when we admit to our powerless, we give up that emptiness. And then there's 2 S's. The first S stands for selfishness. Sometimes, if we're honest, we think of the Lord's Prayer as saying, Our Father who art in heaven, give me, give me, give me. But what does the Lord's Prayer actually say? Give us, right? It's us. It's this idea of community, not just give me. So we give up selfishness. And if we're really honest, selfishness is probably at the heart of most of the problems that we have amongst people, right? So admitting to powerlessness helps us get over that. The last thing we want to give up when we admit that we're powerless is separation, right? Separation. Separation from God, feeling separated from God. The reality is that when we feel separated from God, God's not actually going anywhere, right? Like God's not actually going anywhere. It's somehow that connection is lost, but it's not on God. God is constantly seeking after us. And so when we admit to powerlessness, that's our first step in kind of overcoming those feelings of separation. Whew, that was fast, all right? You guys got that? Like I said, if you missed one of those, they're in your book there. And so, there you go. We are now done with principle 1, all right? So 1 out of 8 is done because we got those first 2 lessons out of the way. Coming out of denial and then admitting to our powerlessness, all right? Good? All right. Let's end with the serenity prayer. Here we go. And remember, we're just going to say this all together here, all right? All right, here we go. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for being here again, and we will see you next week. Don't forget, homework again, just lesson 2 in your book, and we'll have some solid conversation again next week. Thank you all. Have a great night.